The two best deer hunting rifles of the 20th century, in my opinion. What are they? Why? Have we built anything better? Let's talk about that today. Welcome to Gunfighter Life. We tackle this topic, God willing, many more, the right way with God Almighty at the center, biblical Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. Military, law enforcement, private security contracting, but more germane to today's episode, hunter, since I was a boy. Been blessed to hunt all over this beautiful country. You know, it just struck me talking about of the 20th century, there are grown men out there hunting who were born in the 21st century, which doesn't actually make me feel old, because I don't feel old. But I grew up hunting in the 20th century. And looking back at my generation and my elders' generation, and even their father's generation, and what they hunted with, and looking back at those rifles and my hunting experience, what do I consider the best hunting rifles of the 20th century? I got it narrowed down to two, and I'll probably get into more of that later. And I said deer rifles, but big game, right? Deer, elk, pronghorn, etc. Now, let me just say that I grew up hunting as a poor boy in the South. I did all my deer hunting with a shotgun, because a shotgun was like the cheap, affordable thing to use to put meat on the table, whether it was waterfowl or small game or deer. People I knew hunted with rifles. I also grew up in the southeastern United States. Things are close, and also deer were nowhere near as prevalent in the 20th century as they are today. They started getting built back in the in the latter part of that. But growing up, even in a lot of places, seeing a deer was kind of a rare thing. Now deer are everywhere, kind of like a coyote. I never heard of a coyote growing up back home. I heard that they were out west, but never heard of them, never saw them. They're all over the East Coast now. A lot of that wildlife has come back since it was extirpated from much of its range in the earlier part of the 20th century. So if I was going to hunt for food, deer, again, were not nearly as plentiful as they are today. But people love deer hunting in the 20th century. And people I knew that were, let's say, more affluent than I was, hunted with a rifle. They had having different guns like we usually do today. Like, I've got this gun for this and that gun for that. It wasn't just like, I have a shotgun for putting meat on the table. It was like, I got this gun for this and this gun for that. And this rifle is specifically for deer hunting. A lot of people in the 20th century had a basic battery, a shotgun, a deer rifle, a .22, a handgun. And there are a lot of legendary firearms. Since then, I've been blessed to do a lot of hunting with a rifle. I've been a professional guide. I've hunted all over this beautiful country, from whitetail on the East Coast to mule deer on the West Coast, and elk and bear and wolf, and even some exotics. So, with that, there are a few guns that are a cut above. The first one I'm going to talk about is no surprise, but it is a pre-64 Winchester Model 70, right? The rifleman's rifle. I don't know whether that was clever marketing or if that was given by the people that used it, but it's true either way. It's a rifleman's rifle. The pre-64 Winchester Model 70 is just superb. Their action is so smooth and so reliable. It's a controlled round feed. That's why I specified the pre-64. They went to a cheap push feed, which a lot of rifles are today, when everybody just wanted another rifle, and all they cared about was, can we get it sub-MOA and how cheap can we make it? But before that, people cared about things like, is it actually going to work in hard conditions? The brief history lesson here. The Winchester pre-64 Model 70, based on the 1903 Springfield, which we kind of We copied from the Mauser. So they're all in that family. That is a legendarily reliable action. That Mauser 98 style action, giant beefy claw extractor. If you don't believe me, look at the extractor. Go Google an image of, or DuckDuckGo, or whatever search engine you want to use. I don't advocate using Google, but look at the extractor on a pre-64 Winchester Model 70 versus something like a Remington 700 or, a Ruger American, or, one of the push feeds. Look at the extractor on that thing, and it's a controlled round feed. So from the moment it pops out, assuming the gun works correctly, from the moment it pops out of the magazine, that giant claw extractor guides that round in and out, which eliminates a lot of potential and real actual malfunctions, whether they're mechanically induced or user induced. I would hate to see what kind of grit and grime and blood and mud would have to get into a chamber to fail to extract like a 30-06 round with a pre-64 Winchester Model 70. Because you're not just grabbing a little piece of that rim like a push feed does. You're grabbing a giant chunk of that brass with that giant claw extractor. There's a reason they're renowned for like Alaskan hunters and dangerous game guides and, dangerous game hunters in Alaska. Not specifically this gun, but sometimes this gun, but a controlled round feed gun. The Winchester Model 70 is that, the pre-64. It is also just beautifully fit and finished. They are remarkably accurate, even by today's standards. Without being free-floated, without any of the, buzzwords of today, they are often phenomenally accurate. Let me talk about mine. I am blessed to have a pre-64 Winchester Model 70 featherweight in 30-06. And it's just so good in so many ways. It balances well. It shoots well. I don't even know if I've bothered to measure any of the groups. It just shoots really, really well. It shoots well with 150 grain. It shoots well with 180 grain. It shoots well with 220 grain. In fact, this is the rifle that I took when I went to live in Alaska. Even though I could have gotten a much newer, more modern rifle, I couldn't find one with all the features that the pre-64 Winchester Model 70 has. Now, I since have been able to find a modern rifle like that, but iron sights, controlled round feed, smooth action, exquisite fit and finish. That's more of an aesthetic thing, but they are just beautifully elegant rifles. They're still very good. They're chambered in modern cartridges, right? We're not talking about like a 45-70. We're talking a modern Spitzer bottleneck cartridge. There, you can get a pre-64 original, like all original, chambered in 30-06, 270, 308, 243, which are still fantastic and staples of the big game hunting smorgasbord of cartridges. Are there newer cartridges? Yes. Are there better cartridges? I'm going to say not really. Not for the way that I like to hunt. And I like to hunt spot and stalk and still hunting and tracking. And I realize that most of you guys hunt out of a tree stand for that too. And just the only thing, and for me, that the pre-64 Winchester Model 70 doesn't have is stainless steel. That's it. Stainless steel wasn't really a thing used on guns back then. It was blue steel or Parkerized. But, stainless steel rifles and handguns and stuff like that would not come along till quite a bit later. So, but other than that, just iron sights, light, handy, they point well, they handle well, they're accurate. Again, I can't say enough good things about it. It is the rifleman's rifle for like classic rifle craft. And by that, I don't mean shooting off a bipod. I don't mean shooting off a bench. I don't mean some giant apparatus with a laser rangefinder and 5 different computers to figure out what you're doing. I'm talking about grabbing the rifle, standing, sitting, kneeling, prone, and getting rounds on target practically with or without a hasty sling. Like that kind of rifleman. That is a rifleman's rifle. That's number one. Probably no surprise. The second one, these are the two, right? And I've narrowed it down to two. There are a lot of really good rifles of the 20th century, obviously. But the two, I think, are still the best big game hunting rifles of the 20th century. The second one is a Remington. I know you're probably thinking, yeah, the Remington 700. Wrong answer. No, not that one. There is almost no circumstance where I would pick a Remington 700 over I'm talking about a factory 20th century Remington 700 over a pre-64 Winchester Model 70. Now, some of the newer ones, the improved ones with better extractors and better bolts and things like that, free-floated, maybe. But like the 20th century ones, there is in no circumstance, unless I got to shoot both rifles and one was just way better than the other for whatever individual reason, there is no way that I think the Remington Model 700 is a better rifle than the pre-64 Winchester Model 70. It's a push feed, which I already talked about that. It is, the original ones weren't free-floated. That came later. They have a reputation for snapping extractors. They have a reputation for snapping bolts, like the bolt handle snapping off. They became popular, I think in large part because they were pretty accurate and they were cheap. Hence, a lot of the cheap push feeds that are accurate today. But they were cheaper than the pre-64 Winchester Model 70. In fact, so much so that I've heard, one of the big reasons that Winchester switched to a push feed after 1964, because they wanted to compete with the cheap manufacturing of the Remington Model 700. The pre-64 Winchester is a more, I think, complicated to machine, and I'm not a machinist, but just looking at it seems like a more complicated apparatus as far as the bolt and the receiver goes than a Remington 700, which is basically just a tube and a bolt. But I would never, again, unless we're talking about individual rifles, and if you love your 700, that's great. I have 700s that I like and hunt with, but I can't say that's a better design or offers anything over a Winchester Model 70 pre-64. What I can say in certain circumstances offers more is the Remington 760. Now, growing up, my uncle, who did a lot to teach me how to hunt as far as people that taught me, I was blessed to have an uncle that liked to hunt. My father did take me out a bit, but my uncle took some extra time and took me out when he really didn't have to, and I really appreciate that. I hope he knows how much that meant to me and how much that stuck with me. But he hunted with a Remington 760. A lot of that generation and before hunted with a Remington 760. This is a pump action. Yes, a pump action rifle. And a full-powered rifle cartridge. Again, we're not talking about, a PCC. We're not talking about a pistol caliber carbine. We're not talking about any of that. We're talking about a full-powered, proper rifle cartridge in things like 30-06, 308, 35 Whelen. Although I think that one might have came out after. I think that one wasn't standardized until later. So that might have came out after the 20th century. But it's been chambered in a lot of really good cartridges. 270, right? Fully good, capable, not really giving anything up as far as practical hunting goes, big game cartridges. And I have one. I'm blessed to have one. And it's ridiculously accurate. This one really surprised me. Like, I'm not really surprised that my pre-64 Winchester Model 70 shoots well, because it's got a reputation for that. But you would think, a pump gun, the forearm, he moves back and forth, it can't be that accurate. I shot under half MOA group with one of the first regular loads. I worked up some low recoil loads and stuff for a youth shooter for mine. But the first, and some subsonic loads, but the first, I would say, pretty standard load, the first one I tried, I shot under half MOA. That's under half inch. Under half MOA, right? Which, with a Bushnell 1.75 to 4 power scope that I have mounted on it, right? With that Bushnell scope, 4 power, half MOA group, phenomenally accurate. And these have a reputation. I just wasn't really aware of it until I realized what a good gun that was. I picked it up for not a lot of money. I've always, my uncle hunted with one of these. I know a lot of old timers did. I didn't really appreciate that because, when you're young and spunky, you think, you know everything, and then you're like, oh, surely these old timers, they don't know about all the cool modern stuff we have today. And then when you get a little bit older, you realize, maybe there's some wisdom in challenging the narrative, but maybe there's some wisdom in thinking, why did they use and why did they love these old Remington 760s, or why did they love the things that they loved so much? This gun is fast follow-up shots, and I'm talking fast. The more I work with this gun, the more I appreciate it. Not only is it accurate, it's fast. So there are certainly still many, many situations where I'd rather have a good, robust, controlled round feed rifle. Bolt action. I like bolt actions. But there are some situations where I would really like the speed of that pump. And unlike the Remington 700, this one is free-floated. It's got a free-floating forend because it's a pump. It doesn't touch the barrel. Maybe that's one of the reasons it's so accurate. Well, it's fast, it's accurate, it handles well, it balances well, it's sleek, it's svelte. Also, I've got a lot of training and time in with Remington 870s. I've often talked about my time in, more specialized assignments in law enforcement. And even though I'd have access to armories with submachine guns and fully automatic assault rifles and all kinds of cool stuff, oftentimes when it came to kicking down doors, the thing that I would like to have is a Remington 870 with buckshot and slugs, because I don't care what looks cool on Instagram. That wasn't a thing then. But I didn't care about that. I cared about what was going to keep me breathing. I didn't care what looked cool. I didn't think about what was going to, look cool when I'm looking back at my old pre-digital pictures of me sitting on a pile of confiscated stuff with my SWAT gear. I didn't care about what gun looked the coolest. I cared about what was going to keep me alive, because in order to look cool, you got to be alive. And I would often choose an 870. It saddens me that Remington has since gone under, and they don't make anything anymore that I'm aware of. At least at the time of this recording. Maybe that will change when somebody else buys them up. But as far as I know, they're not making anything. But one of the just things that shoots well for me, and I've tried other guns, and I like other guns, but a Remington 870, they're just, especially like a good one, like an old Wingmaster, they're so smooth, and they point so well, and so fast. As fast as just about any non-self-loading gun can fire, right? Well, imagine the smoothest like 870 you've ever felt, if you're familiar with like an old Wingmaster. Now imagine that smaller and trimmer, but just as smooth, like hot butter sliding on a warm skillet, just so smooth. That's a Remington 760 Game Master, right? It's built off, I believe, a 28 gauge Remington 870. Like that was like the receiver they used for it, I believe. Every bit as smooth. And again, crazy accurate. Good iron sights. A lot of rifles that don't even come with iron sights, which I think is a tragedy. I think you should be able to opt in or opt out of iron sights, but most models today don't even come with them. Again, they're just like, how can we make a push feed gun that's, we can just give a 1 MOA guarantee. Forget about ergonomics, forget about anything, just cheap, accurate, done. These guns are not just accurate, they're fast, they're beautiful, they handle well, they point well, they balance well. And I do all kinds of hunting. I don't particularly like sitting still. I don't own a deer stand or anything. I hunted that way growing up, and I really don't like it. But I like to still hunt. I like to spot and stalk. I like to track. I'll hunt with hounds. I raise Rhodesian Ridgebacks. I'll hunt bear with hounds and stuff. But for a lot of that hunting, man, there's a lot of advantage to that pump gun. Again, I'm not talking about, driving your, side by side with a 12-pound rifle and a tripod and a bipod and 3 different computers, your GPS app and your Kestrel and your laser rangefinder and your giant scope with fidget spinners for dialing and bobbles and widgets. I'm just talking about a rifle and a scope, max point blank range, sights on target, press the trigger, get the animal. And for stalking, tracking, still hunting, either one of these rifles is a phenomenal choice. Again, certain situations, I would want that bolt action, controlled round feed. Certain situations, I would want the speed of that Remington 760. The more I work with it, I can't believe it took me so long to get one. I just got one last year. The more I appreciate it. And these used to be super underappreciated. They used to be super cheap. Now they're climbing up there in price. Still probably undervalued for what they are because nobody else that I'm aware of makes a full-powered pump action, like in a proper rifle caliber, 30-06, 270, 308. Nobody else makes one. So they're probably still undervalued, but they're a lot more expensive than they used to be. But then again, so is gasoline. So what are you going to do? But both of these rifles, there are certain situations where I take a 760. There are many situations where I take the Winchester Model 70. And this is why I say these are the two best. There is really no circumstance where I would pick another rifle over these unless you got crazy specific and made like a bunch of criteria. Is the Savage 99 a good rifle? Yeah, it's a fantastic rifle. But I can't think of a situation where I pick one of those over a Remington 760. Is a, Marlin 336 a legendary 20th century hunting rifle? For sure, they are. But for me, I can't think of a situation unless I just wanted to where I would pick one of those over a Remington 760 or a Winchester Model 70. I'm going to a not modern cartridge in my opinion. I'm going to and there's nothing wrong with it, right? A 30-30, 35 Remington, which I really like that cartridge. But guess what? I think I can get either one of those guns I talked about in a 35 Remington. And for sure, like a lot of people live on the East Coast, the majority of you guys live on the East Coast, and you hunt deer inside 150 yards, and that's fantastic. And a 30-30 is plenty for that, but I don't live there. And even though I do shoot a lot of my deer inside 150 yards, even out west, don't believe the marketing hype that you need a 1,000-yard rifle to hunt elk or deer. But you know what? A 30-06 works just as good. It's not like inside 150 yards a 30-30 has any advantage over a 30-06. It doesn't. There's nothing wrong with a 30-30. I'm not putting it down. If you love hunting with your lever action 30-30, I get it. It's nostalgia. It's cool. I'm just saying for me, my opinion, and those are all good rifles. Savage 99s, Marlin 336s, Winchester Model 94s. These are all legendary rifles. I'm talking about still, if I were still going out to hunt, which I still hunt, and I still hunt with 20th century rifles. I'm talking about if I'm going out, of the best for me, for where I live, what I like to hunt, 20th century big game hunting rifles. It would be the narrowing it down as much as I can, making as many people angry as possible that like all these other guns. Again, Winchester Model 70 pre-64 or the Remington 760. I think these are the best. Not the only thing that I would hunt with. I have Remington 700s. I have improved versions of Remington 700s. And if it's a good rifle and I don't care about the controlled round feed, nothing wrong with them. Now, am I saying that you have to get one of these or you need one of these? No, I'm not saying that. Getting back to that based on the Mauser action, one of the ones that didn't make this list but is actually one of my favorite platforms for hunting, period, is a Ruger M77. Now, these did come out in the 20th century. Although I have had the older ones, the Tang safety ones, people love those. They're fine. I actually think the newer version, the Hawkeyes, are the better ones, and I believe those are 21st century guns. But like one of the things Ruger is known for is making working class, good quality, hard use guns. And the Hawkeyes are that, and they're also known for stainless steel. Getting back to that, the Ruger, two of my favorite 21st century hunting rifles that I own, what I think is the best version of a scout rifle that I've ever used is the Ruger gun sight scout rifle. Not the new one, not the American, not the cheap plastic push feed, but the controlled round feed, Mauser based or pre-64 Winchester style stainless steel. Lightweight, handy, 308 scout rifle, the gun sight scout rifle. Phenomenal. All the things I said about the Winchester 94, minus the fit and finish. It does not have the smooth action. It does not have the smoothness or the elegance, right, of the pre-64 Winchester Model 70. But it's just as rugged, and it's stainless steel. and it has iron sights, which a lot of new rifles don't. Also, the Ruger guide gun in 30-06. It's a bit heavier though. It's my featherweight weighs right around 7 pounds, maybe a bit less. I'm talking naked weight, and the Ruger guide gun that I have weighs almost 8 pounds, I believe, naked. That's a bit heavy, but it is more rugged, right? It is stainless steel. It is instead of the old beautiful walnut stocks, it has a laminated stock, which some people don't like as much. I think they look just as cool, not as classic, but they are, more resilient and resistant to weather and stuff like that. That one is also crazy accurate. Both of those are pretty accurate once you put some bedding and stuff in there. But my old Pre-64 Winchester Model 70 is crazy accurate. I haven't brought myself to bed it because it would kind of take away from the collector value. But it's accurate without being bedded. I had to bed I didn't have to, but I bedded both my Rugers and they got pretty accurate. My Ruger guide gun, all the things I said about the Pre-64 Winchester Model 70, minus like the elegance and the weight, but just a phenomenally accurate, rugged, reliable gun. It's a bit heavy. So there are still certain situations where even though I have both of those modern stainless steel iterations of the, Pre-64 Winchester action, I would take the original sometimes. I think that would be a better hunting rifle sometimes than even the newer ones. And then everybody's like, oh, lever actions. I've owned several lever actions. I've tried over and over again to love the lever action. I don't know if and I like John Wayne movies, right? Maybe I just didn't get that nostalgia bug. But I look at guns practically, and there are some really good lever actions. There are even some, I just did an episode, I don't know if it'll come out before or after this, I think before this, where I talk about modern lever actions, meaning they fire modern rifle cartridges. And by modern, I mean like 1900, right? Like a 30-06, which is 1906. But like high velocity, Spitzer, pointed bullets, right? Bottleneck cartridges. There are some lever actions that do that. But in what way is a lever action better than a pump? So if I'm looking at that, and a lot of those are $1,000, $1,500 for like a Long Ranger or a BLR. Both good guns. Unless you give me a real strict caveat, like how are those better than a Remington 760? Again, the only ways I can think of, the Browning BLR comes in stainless and they make a takedown version. So if I'm looking for that, yeah. But a big chunk of the time, I think you're probably better off with that pump gun, even still. These have stood the test of time, in my opinion. Now, if you're just in for the latest, greatest, polymer, Cerakoted, what gets clicks on Instagram, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And I own plenty of Cerakoted stuff, right? But the deer or the elk is not going to be impressed by, whatever the latest fashion of camo pattern on your stock is. These two rifles, the Winchester Model 70, Pre-64, and the Remington 760 have been putting big game in the freezer for a long time, and God willing, myself and many others will have them for a long time in the future. And God willing, they'll be able to pass those down to future generations, right? These are phenomenal guns. And if I had to narrow it down to the two best big game hunting rifles of the 20th century, it would be the Pre-64 Winchester Model 70 and the Remington 760. I know a lot of you have other favorites, and I'm not talking to individual rifles. You could have an individual rifle that's something crazy that you just love, and that's your favorite deer rifle. That's fantastic. But of the platforms, these are hard to beat. I know this one may be one that gets a lot of emotion. People get really attached to their deer hunting rifles and cartridges. So let me know in the comments if you disagree, what you think is better of the 20th century big game rifles. And I reserve the right to change my mind. Maybe there's something out there that I might rank higher in the future. But I think that's enough. Let's start wrapping it up here. The tactical tip of the day. I will often shoot off a bench. I know. Shooting off a bench is good and useful for many things. It is good and useful for load development. I was just doing that yesterday. I'm hand loading for my 280 Ackley Improved, trying to find some good loads that it likes. By God Erase, I found two that the gun likes. I totally understand the use of shooting off a bench or off your belly or, from a bipod or a tripod. I fully understand that. And I understand the benefits of that. And I understand it's really satisfying to shoot a small, teeny tiny group. I get that. I understand why there's modern bench rest shooting techniques where your front hand doesn't even touch the front of the gun at all, like the forend. And that's all fine for picking a load that the gun likes and making sure everything works properly. I get that. However, your point of impact could be vastly different if you use one of those shooting styles that are meant for like a big heavy gun off a bench and you actually hunt practically and shoot your animal off your hind legs, like meaning you're standing, shooting unsupported, offhand. When I say offhand, some people get confused. But offhand just means, classic standing unsupported, with or without a hasty sling. Or kneeling, or traditional prone without a rest, or sitting position, which a lot of people have forgotten is even a position. But if you're shooting like that, your point of aim could be drastically different. So even if you're shooting with a rest off a bench or off a sandbag or whatever, hold the gun. My advice, tactical tip, is hold the gun the way that you're going to hold it when you shoot it. Like if you grab the forearm when you're shooting standing or kneeling, grab the forearm when you're shooting, even if you're resting it on a bag. This can, not always, but can change your point of aim, point of impact. If your goal is to shoot little teeny tiny groups, do a bench rest position. If your goal is to get your gun zeroed for how you're actually going to use it in the field, make sure you're holding it that way when you zero it, or as close to as possible. So that's your tactical tip of the day, your tactical verse of the day. A great verse that I like to think about often when I'm hunting, especially when I'm going up some pretty steep terrain. He makes my feet like the feet of a deer. He sets me on high places. He teaches my hands to make war so that my arms can bend a bow of bronze. My comments. And the Psalms make me think about King David. I hope we are all maybe striving to be a bit more like King David if we're called to. Slayers of beasts and great warriors. How did David start before he slew Goliath? He slayed lions and bear. And he became a mighty warrior. I think there's still obviously there's still a lesson in that for us today, but men who identify with that, being hunters, being warriors. King David is a good study as far as many other attributes that David was a man after God's own heart. With that, thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.